Hi, I'm Susan Corbett, and welcome to my quilting room. Over the years, lots of people have asked me to show them how I work and how I decide what to quilt, so I've decided to try and do that. I quilt on a Gamble Classic that I bought in 1999 before there were computerized machines. So I do things the old-fashioned way. And so today I'll be showing you a customer's quilt. It's called Tiny Beast because at the center of each block there's a fussy-cut little animal in each one. And I start off stabilizing the quilt and doing the straight line work first, and there's a whole lot of straight lines all over this quilt. So I'm anchoring the perimeter of the quilt, ditch quilting in between blocks and alternate blocks and borders, and then I've chosen a straight line design in all the blocks. So I'll show you how I do that. So next up is how I use a tool that hardly anybody has it anymore except those of us with older machines. All right, today what I want to talk about is using this old tool that came with my Gamble Classic when I first bought it back in 1999. It's called a gam guide, and it's just a long ruler is what it is. I guess it's about 4 feet tall, and how you use it is you put this part here up against that pickup roller, and then it works like a rudder. I brace it up against that roller and then can move this like you would any other ruler. A lot of people, don't know what to do with it. But I still think it's really useful. I like it a lot. It's really stable, and that's how I quilt a diagonal line. So, all right. If your presser foot, let's see. See, mine has this high side on the back, but on the front it doesn't. So you want to run your ruler up against the back of it. If you've got a presser foot that is high all around, then it doesn't matter where this thing goes. But for safety's sake, I like to run this against the back. I was taught never use the gam guide between you and the needle. So it always goes on the back side. All right, so here I'll start to do the ditch quilting in between the blocks. And this quilt is so multicolored that I'm using clear thread on the top. It is a sulky polyester, super skinny thread, and just a cream-colored, lightweight polyester in the bobbin. I have always found that thread really hard to use on a long arm. Well, I think hard on any machine. So years ago, I wrote to Sulky to ask their experts how to get it to work in my long arm. And I got back copious notes. They were so helpful. And I was so grateful to have it. So they said each machine is going to be different. and you just have to play with it and see what works. So following their instructions, I threaded the thread through not quite all the tension guides. Like if there's 2 holes for the thread to go in, like, just use one, skip some of the process, and loosen the tension just so very much. And like I have to loosen it a lot. And it's really tricky to get the bobbin tension to cooperate. And even when it's working properly, that thread is notorious for breaking. It doesn't need a reason to break. But now that I've figured out what works, it really helps a whole lot. I used to change thread color all the time, and that just slowed down the process. So I'm quilting in between the blocks, and then within the block, I'm doing some ditch quilting, not a whole lot. I don't want to pile on. This quilt was not about quilting densely. So I'm doing a little bit of ditch quilting, and I found a sequence. I have to plan my path for efficiency. I want to limit the number of stops and starts. So I would quilt up and down diagonally in between the blocks, and then go back and quilt the block itself. And while I'm in there, outline the print in the little center, like I'm outlining each little creature. So in this section, I've changed threads now. I have put in the thread that I'm going to use to quilt the rest of the quilt in, which is a medium sort of turquoise thread that matches the border really well. We decided on that because the thread is going to contrast everywhere, having used this many different fabrics in the quilt. And so I asked my client what's her favorite color throughout the whole thing, and that one seemed to make sense. So what I'm doing now is putting in the straight lines in the alternate blocks, which are diamonds, and then another straight line design in the blocks themselves. And here, once again, it's important to figure out a path that will go all around the block and limit the number of stops and starts. And that, takes a little bit of doing, but with some practice, it's fun. I think of figuring out what to quilt on a quilt to be like solving a puzzle. And figuring out the sequence is one of those puzzles. When choosing quilting designs, I think in terms of contrast. If all the quilting is the same and all the same size, then it's really boring. So if you change it up, then that makes it a lot more interesting. So there are lines in the alternate blocks, but then all different lines in the blocks themselves. And I think these turned out pretty darn well. I asked my client for input, what she'd like me to quilt on her quilt, and she didn't have a lot to tell me, just that she didn't want it real heavy, and she didn't want feathers, which I really agreed with. This quilt is really contemporary, so we didn't have to go the traditional route, and she seemed to gravitate toward linear designs. So that's how I ended up choosing what I did. Inside the block, I did a whole bunch of lines, and then just to frame the diamond that contains the little beast, I did continuous curve. So that means arcs from point to point to point. It's a quick way to get around the quilt, and it's like the machine quilting version of outline quilting and hand quilting. For the alternate blocks, what I'm doing is quilting 3 consecutive rows of lines that form diamonds. And then in the remaining space in the center, I'm doing a pattern meander. At first I tried quilting the line from left to right all the way across the quilt, and that didn't seem to be as efficient as quilting each diamond individually. So when I get to the right of the diamond, then I'm just taking a few stitches into the next diamond and resuming. And that part went fairly quickly. The time-consuming part was quilting the individual blocks. Most of the quilting I do is custom quilting. If I do an overall design, that goes a lot faster, but I don't do pantographs. I don't enjoy doing those. So here's a look at the border and the back of the quilt. The back shows the quilting much better than the front because it's a lighter colored fabric. And the border is just a bunch of undulating lines with little pattern meanders in between some of them.